When you look around at nature, it's just mind-blowing. Think about a leaf or a single cell. How does all of that incredible complexity get built? There's no grand architect, no master blueprint. So how does matter figure out how to organize itself into these beautiful, stable structures? Well, the answer might be a lot simpler and, honestly, a lot cooler than you think.
And that mystery gets way, way deeper when you rewind the clock all the way back to the beginning, to that primordial soup. Before there was any genetic code, before DNA could even exist to store instructions, how did the basic molecules of life, sugars, nucleotides, all that stuff, how did they know how to assemble? That's the huge question we're going to dig into today.
And it turns out, the answer seems to come down to this really powerful idea called assembly heuristics. So, forget everything you know about complicated blueprints. Instead, think of these as nature's simple little recipes, just basic instructions that pop up naturally from the laws of physics and chemistry.
Okay, so what in the world are they? Well, assembly heuristics are just simple, repeating rules that guide how something gets built, one step at a time. The really key thing here is what they don't need. There's no foresight, no master plan, and definitely no genetic code. It's all happening at the most local level you can imagine. Each little piece only knows what to do next, not what the final thing is supposed to look like.
So, what kind of environment makes this possible? Well, basically one with zero top-down control. The only thing driving the whole process is chemical stability. Each molecule is just trying to fall into the most stable, most comfortable position with its immediate neighbors. That's it, one little step at a time.
If you had to boil this entire incredible process down to just one single command, this would be it, right here. This is the heart of what's called recursive logic. You use what you just built to figure out the very next step. It's such a simple idea, but this iterative loop is so powerful. It's how you get these amazing, complex patterns to just emerge out of total chaos.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. It contrasts how we usually build things with how nature does it. We humans rely on blueprint thinking, this top-down plan that's really complex and takes a ton of energy. Nature, on the other hand, uses heuristic thinking. It's bottom-up, it's super efficient, and it doesn't aim for one specific design. It just generates a stable pattern that works.
Okay, so this is a really cool idea in theory, but where do we actually see it happening? Well, let's look at some real-world examples from prebiotic chemistry, from the world that existed long, long before life as we know it.
Let's start with ribose. That's the 5-carbon sugar that makes up the backbone of RNA. Now, if you imagine the chaotic chemical soup of early Earth, you'd expect just a random mess of molecules to form, right? But nope, ribose shows up with surprising reliability. And the big question is, why?
It's because it's following a simple heuristic, a simple recipe. The process is just a short, repeating loop. You add a carbon, the structure shifts around a bit, and then, this is the crucial part, it becomes most stable when it closes up into a 5-carbon ring. That stability, it's like a ratchet. It just locks that result in place. The rule is simply add a carbon, rearrange, stabilize, and repeat. That's all it takes. It's a fantastic example of how a complex, useful structure can just emerge from chaos, with no blueprint needed.
All right, next up, adenine. This is one of the 4 bases in DNA, and it's also a huge part of our cell's energy source, ATP. How it forms is another absolutely stunning example of a simple assembly rule just doing its thing.
The recipe here is just wild. You start with 5 identical, simple molecules of hydrogen cyanide, or HCN. They link up one by one. But then, after that 5th one joins, bam, something amazing happens. The whole chain just spontaneously rearranges itself and clicks into the super stable 2-ring structure of adenine. It's another perfect case of a short, efficient little algorithm building one of the cornerstones of life.
Okay, but what about the very first cells? To even be a cell, you need a wall, right? A membrane that separates the inside from the outside. Well, it turns out that this absolutely essential first step also happens pretty much automatically and is driven by one of the simplest rules you can imagine.
So simple fatty acid molecules have 2 ends, a tail that hates water and a head that loves water. When you throw them into water, they just spontaneously organize themselves to follow this one rule. The tails all hide from the water and the heads all face out towards it. And what's the most energy-efficient way to do that? You form a sphere, a little bubble. And just like that, you have the first protocell membranes building themselves.
So here's the really crucial point. This stuff isn't just some forgotten history from the primordial soup.
The same logic, this self-assembly using simple, local rules, it has scaled up and it is still running the show inside our own incredibly complex cells right now.
I mean, everything from the cytoskeleton growing one tiny piece at a time, to the crazy intricate folds inside our mitochondria, to how entire organelles get duplicated. Our cells are still governed by these bottom-up heuristic rules. There's no master blueprint calling the shots.
And this gives us a totally new and powerful way to think about a cell. Instead of seeing it as some single, centrally controlled machine, we can see it for what it really is, a bustling city of tiny, independent algorithms, all running at the same time, in parallel, to build and maintain the entire structure from the ground up. Pretty cool, right?
Now, this whole idea of repeating patterns and this recursive logic, it probably makes you think of something else you've seen in nature, the famous Fibonacci sequence. But to really get this right, we have to be super careful and precise about what that comparison actually means.
And it's such a tempting question to ask, isn't it? When we see these beautiful repeating patterns everywhere, is nature literally sitting there doing math? Is it following some universal template, calculating numbers like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5? The answer is a hard no, and this slide is so important. Nature is not sitting there with a calculator. It is not following the Fibonacci sequence like a template. What it is doing is using the same type of logic, that pattern of recursive growth, where you build the next step from the ones that came before. The pattern we see is an emergent consequence of that simple rule. It's a side effect, not the goal.
So whenever we use a phrase like Fibonacci-like logic, this is what we really mean. It's just a metaphor for the process itself, a short algorithm repeated over and over that leads to an emergent, stable structure. That right there is the very heart of assembly heuristics.
And this brings us to what is maybe the most important takeaway of this whole thing. Let's be really clear. What we've been talking about here is a model. It's a framework for thinking about self-organization. This is not a proven, definitive theory of how life began, and it's not meant to prove or disprove any belief system. It's just a new lens, a new way to look at a very old and very difficult problem, not the final answer.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. This way of thinking, of seeing incredible complexity just emerge from simple, local rules, it's a huge shift in perspective. If our own biology is built this way from the bottom up, what else are we missing? What other complex systems out there might we finally begin to understand if we could just stop looking for a blueprint that was never there in the first place?